The central question of social science is, why do human beings behave the way they do? And for those of us who study communication as a social scientist, the question becomes, why do human beings communicate the way they do? And for those of us who study relationships, the question becomes, why do human beings behave in relationships the way they do? Today we're going to talk about relational dialectics, a theory posited by Leslie Baxter and Barbara Montgomery that presents a unique answer to that question. For Baxter and Montgomery, contradiction is at the heart of every relationship, and their answer to the question of why we do relationships the way we do, why we behave in them the way we do, is simple. We behave in relationships the way we do to find a way to deal with those opposing tensions in relationships. Every relationship has a tension, say, between intimacy and independence. Sometimes we act a certain way because we need intimacy. We may go out of our way to make time to spend with a partner because of a desire for intimacy. Pardon me, I'm going to have some tea. But we also have a need for independence. So sometimes in those relationships, we make sure to establish times where we get to be alone or to go and do things that don't involve the other partner because we seek that independence. Every relationship is fraught with these kinds of tensions, according to Baxter and Montgomery. So let's take a look at some of those tensions and at how Baxter and Montgomery explain that we attempt to deal with them. Baxter and Montgomery divide these tensions into two types. We have internal and we have external dialectics. Internal dialectics are those tensions between the two people in the relationship. And external dialectics are those tensions between the relationship partners and the world around them, and their social worlds, if you will. Let's talk about three of each. When we talk about internal dialectics, I think we have to start with what is the primary strain in every relationship, it seems, the tension between connectedness and separateness. We want to feel that connection to someone, or else we wouldn't be in a relationship with them. But we don't want to become so lost in that person that we lose our sense of who we are as a separate person. We also have a tension that exists between certainty and uncertainty. There's a degree to which we need to feel the security that comes with knowing how that partner behaves, how we can expect that partner to behave. There's a certain kind of certainty in knowing that my partner is going to make sure that my children have healthy food to eat. There's a certain certainty there's a certain certainty that comes in knowing who this person is, and knowing what I know about them over time helps me to understand better who they are. There's certainty that comes with that knowledge. But there's also a need for uncertainty. A relationship in which everybody knows everything about everyone else becomes a rather dull relationship. It's nice to bring in some uncertainty, to surprise your partner with flowers, whatever, to do something that they don't expect sometimes. And lastly, we have a tension between openness and closedness. We develop our relationships through self-disclosure. You may recall that from studying social penetration theory. So a relationship requires some degree of openness, but do we let our partners know everything there is to know about us? Where is the line drawn between openness and closedness? Well, we have to figure that out. Our relationships are an exercise in figuring that out. Pardon me. So we have these three tensions within relationships: connectedness and separateness, certainty and uncertainty, openness and closedness. We have three analogous tensions that look at the relationship between the couple, the relationship, and the outside world. One is the tension of inclusion and seclusion. In the early stages of relationships, we often see people erring on the side of seclusion, that they want to spend all their time with each other and block out the rest of the world. But eventually, after the heyday of those early head in the cloud days of a relationship start to fade, these people have to get on with their lives and interact with other people. So there's the question of how much we include ourselves, how much we include this relationship in our social worlds. How often do we want to go out together as a couple with other people and be known as a couple with those people? Another analogous tension is the tension between conventionality and uniqueness. There are lots of ways in which we all want our relationships to resemble some of the other relationships we've seen. Whether whether they're relationships we've seen in our families of origin or in friends relationships, even in fictionalized ones. But there are also ways in which we want our relationships to be unique. Nobody wants the same relationship that they saw with another couple of people. They want there to be some uniqueness about it. And so we engage in relationships in part in an effort to try to balance, to not necessarily balance, but to manage those two. Finally, among the external dialectics, we have the tension between revelation and concealment. We have to deal with the question of how much do we disclose about our relationship to people around us? How much do we withhold? And what information do we withhold? And what do we disclose? I will recall again the story of my youth group church leader from my childhood who attended my wedding. And when she pulled me aside at the reception, she offered me a piece of advice that I've never forgotten. She said, "You are going to get on her nerves, and she is going to get on your nerves. But whatever you do not pick up the phone and call your family." That information, that what she was saying was that information about our relationship, the notion that we were engaging in conflict with each other, was an area where we should err on the side of concealment, that we would do more harm than good by being overly open, by revealing that kind of information. I've had friends who have erred on that side of telling me way too much about what's going on in their relationship when it may have served them best to keep that information in-house. But again, we all find different ways different comfort zones with how much we want to disclose and how much we want to keep secret. But the decisions we make there have an impact on our relationships. So we have these tensions, big whoop. What do we do about them? Well, different people do different things with different tensions. And Baxter and Montgomery provide us a list of options. One option is simply denial. Some people just choose to pretend that those tensions don't exist. Now, I can't say that that's a healthy response, most of the time anyway, but it is a response that some people engage in. There's sometimes people who are caught off guard by attention when they become aware of it, enter a state of disorientation. They don't know what to do. Um, this sometimes happens at that transitional point uh, between the early stages of a relationship when we want to be together day and night, and that first time when that partner has to be somewhere for one function and you have to be somewhere else for another function, and you realize that you've forgotten how not to be together. That can be a disorienting experience. Sometimes we engage in balance. We try to find a middle ground. We might try to find that middle ground by saying that we will disclose some information, but not all, and we'll try to keep it around half and half. That for half of our social outings, we might invite friends to come with us, but the other half, we want to spend time with just the two of us as a couple. We also might see something that we refer to as segmentation. Uh, Segmentation whereby sometime in some aspects of our relationship we might privilege disclosure over secrecy. But in others, we may allow for secrecy. For instance, when it comes to past relationships, we might decide that that is information that's off grounds. We're just not going to talk about that. But we might decide that if another topic that we regard to be of importance, um, we might decide that that topic warrants more openness, more disclosure than secrecy. So we have lots of different ways of dealing um, with these tensions, and one of the ways is through reaffirmation, through reminding ourselves that these tensions are tough, but that this relationship is worth it. Sometimes that alone is enough to help people get past some difficult tensions. So there is relational dialectics theory in a nutshell. But how good a theory is it? Well, that depends on who you ask. It's obviously an interpretivist theory, and so hardcore scientists may not see value in it. What they may see instead is a theory that's too complex, too chaotic. If we've all got these tensions and every relationship creates its own tensions, we can't follow those goals of science, predict, explain, and control. Those things become a lot harder to do when every relationship has its unique set of tensions and its unique way of dealing with those tensions. There's been another shortcoming acknowledged by some people in that a lot of the research on dialectics is anecdotal in nature. We don't have the kind of systematic, uh, randomly selected samples of research participants that we see in more traditional scientific research. And lastly, there's the question of the external dialectic. If the relationship engages in a dialectical tension with the world outside of that relationship, how do we attempt to understand that? Do I need to interview every part of these people's social networks in order to understand how they manage that tension? If so, we might find ourselves going down a dangerous rabbit hole there where the size of a network just never ends. That social world just expands. Um, my social world with my wife and I have a relationship that's affected by a social world that includes our families of origin and our kids and their friends and their teachers. Um, and where does this end? Our coworkers, and heck, the administration at the university. All of these could become factors, and at some point you have to draw a line. You have to circumscribe a relationship, and you have to circumscribe a social setting, a social world, for us to measure in relation to that in relation to that relationship. So it's a messy theory. It receives more acceptance among interpretive or humanistic theorists. Certainly, it's not not a scientific theory in the pure sense of the word, but it is an interpretive theory that has gained support over the last 3 or 4 decades.